All right. Sweet and holy friends, I want to welcome my friend, my love.
Love, love, love.
Love, love. Uh, yes, I'm in love with Val. Uh, Val Silidker is the co founder and director of the Psychospiritual Institute. She is a board certified master coach and spiritual teacher with over 20 years in leadership and transformation. And I can attest to that. I've willingly followed her to many, many barefoot events. She is also a deep ecologist, an international speaker, coach trainer, and the author of Call of the Ecological Self. Val works with change makers, emerging leaders, and visionaries to inspire the highest level of mindset, purpose, and action in their lives, and has been featured multiple times on Hay House Radio, NBC, and USA Today, as well as other numerous publications. Through her mindful living events, workshops, training programs, and coaching, Val has inspired the transformation of thousands of people throughout the world, many of whom are watching tonight. And not only that, but it's her birthday today. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Oh, I love her.
Thank you, Mark.
I love you. So, what's this program called again?
Only one of the most important things we can be discussing right now.
Tell me, tell me.
Just how to reclaim who we are in the midst of this very intense time, and beyond our political preferences, which seems to be in the forefront of every conversation right now.
So let's talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So please begin. Where would you like to begin? Reclaiming who we are beyond our political preferences.
I feel like a good place to begin is to invite all of us to just take a moment, everyone who's listening and ourselves included, to just take a moment and maybe place your hand on your heart and just close your eyes and take a breath. And for this moment, just this one moment, really lean into what's alive inside of you. Just notice what's here. What's coming up for you right now? All of us are holding so much, many waves of emotions flowing through us. So just see what's there. And as you breathe into that space, also become aware of the part of you that's noticing. That deeper part of you, the one that's observing the emotions or the thoughts, the experience, the stories. And as you connect with that part of you, that loving observer, ask yourself, what does this part of me, this deepest part of me, what is the wisdom that I know in the deepest part of my heart? What is the wisdom of my heart from this place of the unconditionally loving observer? What do I know that perhaps these other parts of me, when I get caught up in them, are not aware of? What is a deeper truth? And breathe into that wisdom, that place of the heart, the part of you that is beyond story. And then just holding on to that wisdom, reconnecting to your whole self and coming back here. And open your eyes and breathe. And I think from here, I want to invite us into the conversation. From this space, Let's explore.
Mm.
Because right now, there are so many stories. It's a very confusing time. And I think people are exhausted. I know I feel it. I feel a lot of polarization, a lot of intensity, a lot of people listening only to talk and not listening to really understand. And I feel like that's the place to begin. It's like, who are we beyond the stories? And how do we begin to listen in order to understand one another and not just to try to convince them of our story? So maybe I'll throw that out there and see
Okay.
how that lands.
I'm thinking about what this looks like practically, you know?
Yeah.
I know in our tradition, this idea of self-nullification is, it's given to us in two different ways. Number one, more of a removing negating the self, trimming the fat of the ego. But there's also this idea of love.
Yes.
Comes, Rabbi Kiva said, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And when we think about nullifying, when we think about really backing up from all of the tendencies and preferences and the combat of the political sphere and revisiting who we are, reclaiming that core essential self, that it's an exercise, number one, and number two, it really is a love. And we were kidding with each other before we talked. When it was just Val and I, and we were, are you comfortable with the word love? Because these days terms have to be comfortable. Can I call you love? My love. And when I talk to Val, I know that I see her essential self. Val, and I'm going to talk about you in the third person because I have to do that now, right? Val is a passionate, warrior for our ecological health, and she's an activist, and she's everything that you bring passion to. And yet, when I talk to Val, and when I love Val, to love Val as I love myself, I'm not the activist that Val is. I'm not as passionate about. Of course, I'm passionate about the earth, but there are things that Val I know is passionate about that I'm just beginning to grow a passion for. And so, when I love her, I love Val. What I love about you is that essential self that I've come to know and love about myself that I see in you. Mm. And when I look at someone who disagrees with me politically, or when I interact with someone who I know is vehemently opposed to some of the things that I hold as essential truths, right?
Yes.
I have to remind myself that there is beneath or beyond or outside of all of the truth, like an exo-truth, right? Beyond all the truths that we hold sacred is the truth that we are really just at the core. Yeah. We're the light of the soul. And so when I love the self, when I love other as myself, I love other self as I love that self in me.
100%. Yes. And that's why as we come back to that loving observer, that part of us that is the part of us that's beyond the story, that is just pure love, awareness, a will, like this part of us, and we can meet each other there, right? It brings us back to, like, when I think about all the stories that are out there right now, and I've had some conversations with friends of mine, we have very different points of view. And what I hear, even though we're saying a story on one level, I'm saying, what's underneath that story? What is it that I value? What is it that you value? And we keep coming back to the same thing. If I value love, then what does it look like for me to express myself through love, as love, with another person? If I value compassion, what does it look like for me to be compassionate about myself and my own ignorance or confusion that I might be having, and also for another, as we're trying to sift through the chaos of the moment? What does it look like for me if I value unity? coming back together in that deep value. Or perhaps there's a fear because I want to have a sense of safety or take care of my child, and I'm so concerned. And here's one story, here's another story, but underneath it, we have the same value, the same heart. So how do we meet each other there? And so what does that look like practically? I think it really looks like beginning to have a conversation that's about an intention of listening and understanding one another so that we can hear ourselves deeper than the stories. Because when we get caught up in the identities of who we think we are, when we get caught up in the stories, we're like removed, one level removed from who we truly are. And if we're trying to fight each other in the level of story, we're not being and seeing and feeling each other on the level of the heart in the same way that you were just speaking of so eloquently. So how do we begin to listen more deeply without even wanting to talk, just like, I just want to hear and understand your passion, your fear, your needs. And how can we meet each other there? No matter how, things, no matter what's happening, because quite honestly, a lot is happening in our world right now that can feel scary. There's some pretty radical things happening. There's violence that's, we got to name that too. That's starting to erupt in our world. This morning, my husband and my son were outside and somebody drove by in a big truck and yelled, "Effing commies." That's what happened this morning to my 6-year-old. There's a lot of intense things happening right now. And it might even feel difficult sometimes, but to know who we are underneath it all and to be able to meet whatever might feel like darkness, we can label it a million things, right? But what feels like someone yelling "effing commie" to my 6-year-old, how do I meet that with love? How do I meet that with compassion? That doesn't mean I accept it.
No.
Gandhi didn't accept things. Nelson Mandela didn't accept things the way they were. They met it with love. They met the situation with love because that was their nature. That is what it means to be fully embodied in our values, in these deeper transpersonal or spiritual qualities that we're longing to experience and express and feel in this world right now. You know what I mean?
Yes. I'm going to tell you the opposite end of that story. One of my kids, and I will not tell you which one, had some friends over last week. I don't even know if I should be sharing this in public. And they thought it would be fun to go across the way and take one of the Trump signs on a neighbor's lawn and violate that sign in creative ways. Thank God they did it over here. Anyways, I live in a neighborhood where everyone has cameras, and they were caught. And I was called. And as soon as I came home, how do I use that as number one, a teaching moment, but also as a means to teach both my neighbor and if I can be patronizing that way, and also my child, I won't say which child, to understand that when someone chooses to vote a certain way, they're choosing to vote that way because they have very personal needs and very personal history and very personal preferences. And often that history and that preference and that need, it doesn't always make sense to us. And if we invite them instead to sit down and we can talk with them and say, I'm curious to know what motivated you, because I'd like to understand better. I might not agree with you, but I can understand, and then we can come to a mutual understanding. And from mutual understanding, something changes, not perspective, not even stance or belief, or passion. But what changes is how we begin to see each other.
Yes.
Not as demographics, not as we see each other as human beings.
Yes.
And that is what I invited my neighbor to at this point. And I encourage the community, I think last week as well, to invite a Republican or a Democrat, to lunch, a Zoom lunch. And in that way, we we begin to practice moving outside of the preferences that the self imposes. Yeah, but go ahead. I want to hear more from you.
No, yeah, I wanted to share a quote actually that's been sitting in me a lot lately. I keep coming back to it, and I'm going to just bring it here so that all these beautiful beloveds can receive it and take it in as well. So this is a quote from another beautiful man named Matt Kahn. This is another spiritual teacher, and he says, "Truth is not a group that you belong to. Truth is noticing the patterns of behavior any group or belief inspires in you. If it inspires you to promote goodness, unity, and ethical value, then it's serving you well. If such goodness, unity, and ethical value takes a back seat to the intensity of the group's message or beliefs, then there's only a misalignment with truth, right? You're only going to find that. So this ultimately means that truth is not limited to the messages being shared, but how well it's communicated, embodied, and demonstrated with respect, humility, compassion, and love."
Oh, there's one of our sages who says that if you want to recognize the legitimacy of your religiosity, you have to ask yourself, is it bringing you closer to Allah?
That's right. Is
And
it bringing us
these are
closer?
two parallel understandings.
That's right. It's right. And it's the heart of it. I keep asking, like, and what am I believing, and what is the story, and is it leading me towards? And what's sitting with me too is like, Biden has been named the president-elect right now. And what do we see? And then right now I want to speak beyond Democrat, Republican. I just want to like notice what we're seeing. We see this massive celebration worldwide. And it's not just because of a candidate won. It's what it symbolizes. And for all of us, I want to invite us to ask wherever you are, wherever you identify politically, what is the celebration about that's deeper than a person? Because it's not ever about just one person. And what I see is a celebration of, first of all, of what everybody felt like was a big exhalation. There's something in that, a relief. There's a celebration of love and unity and compassion, and celebrating all colors of all people, celebrating, gay and straight, and there was a celebration of love and unity and compassion in that dance that happened around the world and is still happening. And the invitation is to really like ask, what is that about? There's something in there that millions of people are experiencing right now. And at the same time, there's also feelings of fear. There's feelings of anger. There's feelings of frustration. And what's underneath that? What are people afraid of? What are people, frustrated by? What are they scared of? What are they feeling hate for? What is that? Like what is going on in these places right now where these very big emotions that we can begin to understand on a deeper level to help us understand each other and our needs right now as a nation, but just as a human on this planet, So I just, just sitting with all of that, what is leaning us? Like, is what I'm sitting with, does it feel good? Is it inviting me to connect with people? Is it inviting me closer to my truth, to the truth of the heart? A lot of questions.
There are, and I imagine there are more than there are answers. I'm curious how not everyone is celebrating.
No, by any
and and so how do we reach out to those who are not in the celebratory mode, but rather who feel disenfranchised? How do we create once again a sense of unity? If I have an uncle who voted differently, or I have a cousin or a friend or a colleague who wants to come back to the dialogue with me, but is hesitant because they understand, that we were opposed uh, politically and socially, and quite possibly even spiritually over the last number of months. So, what the reason why I began this conversation with the idea of a self nullification is because in that exercise is making room for them is that I've left even my truth. You know, there's a saying in the Psalms, Emet Me'eretz Titzmach, there are as many truths as there are blades of grass, you know? So everyone feels that their truth is the truth and the one that they resonate with and makes them feel good. And, you know, and so that they're fine living in that way. And it's not often that we will say anything to change that, you know? But beyond changing that, I want to self-refer. I want to see where in me can I vacate space for some private intimacy between us
Yeah.
and, you know, and us, you know?
That's the point. And that's actually what was in my heart to share about that. It's not us and them. That's the big narrative. That's the big lie. Yeah. There's a lot of lies floating around right now. But one of the biggest ones is us and them, because there's no them. There's not really a them. There's different ideas, but it's only us. It's us. We're all here together on this planet, you know, and we have to look at it in a deeper time than just this moment. We've been here. We're going to be here. We have generations to come. There's a lot of things shifting and moving, and, you know, we're moving through some dark times. But if we can hold ourselves as us, and I think it really keeps coming back to what it is that we value together. What do we value? You know, and listen, and I keep coming back to it. It's really like, how do you approach those that feel like they may not be able to want to have that conversation right now? And maybe the invitation is like, I don't want to talk. I just want to listen. I just want to listen. You know, I have a friend who identifies as Republican, and, you know, he didn't vote for Biden. And I'll say that too, right? Because some Republicans did, right? There's a lot of crossover happening right now. And once President elect happened, you know, he made this post on Facebook, you know, saying, okay, you know, now the next step, how do we come back and start healing and come together in unity? And I wrote something there, and he was like, yeah, I'm like, let's have a conversation. Yeah, let's do that. And so we're both really excited to have a conversation, to listen, not to talk.
Yes.
I really want to understand some things that I'm having a hard time understanding personally, because they don't seem aligned. I'm like, how do you think? I don't understand. I don't get it. But I really want to.
Yes.
I really want to, because I know him and I know his heart, and he's a beautiful being, and we don't align politically. But also he's not falling into this whole like stereotype of anything, right? Because like, guess what? Democrats are not communists. It's like this guy driving by today and yelling commie to my husband and my son, like, not like, it's so wrong. Like, no, that's not who we are. Like, and that's not who you are, and that's not who we are. And we've got to erase these narratives, because people are not looking deep enough. They're not feeling deep enough. They're not. There's also something about, like, you know, there's something of the shadow, you know, being played out in our world right now. There's a lot of things that feel uncomfortable inside of us that we don't always want to turn towards. And when we don't turn towards things in our life, it ends up becoming an event in the world. You know, like Carl Jung said, whatever's rejected from the self appears in the world as an event.
That's funny. It's like, if we don't see the pattern, we become the pattern.
And
right?
so what are we projecting into the world right now as a collective, and also as individuals, that we're not willing to look at? Because if we're showing up in any way other than love, it's not them, it's me. Because every situation is here, and it's the meaning I give it, and it's the way I relate to it that evokes a reaction in me. And if I don't do my inner work, it becomes a reaction that's unconscious, and not a response that's grounded in love and value.
That's the psycho-spiritual perspective. Let's speak to that for a moment. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, I mean, this is that heart of it, right? So what we see playing out right now is a lot of pain. You know, like, if I want to, can I speak candidly on what I see? I don't want to create polarization, but it's like, I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna speak in general then, okay? So in general, if you have a young person who was never loved for who they are, and never seen for who they are, And in order to get love, they had to be a certain way. They had to be a winner. They had to be perfect. They had to be a certain way. They couldn't make mistakes. They couldn't ever lose at anything. They couldn't do, like, they can only be loved if they were a winner. And then you grow up believing that that is how you receive love. And it becomes played out in dangerous ways, right? So all of us, and when we're young, like, if we're not seen, if somebody is not seeing us for who we are and receiving us for who we are, we try to fit into whatever it is that will be received and loved. And I think we can all relate to that in some ways, because, even as parents, like, we're perfectly imperfect, we do our best, but there are moments maybe, right? So we all grow into becoming an inauthentic self in some ways to get that love, right? So there's a lot of that being played out right now, like how, and so that's kind of on the world stage. So when you see that happening, then the shadow inside of a lot of people get permission to, like, start acting out. So what we see right now is we have a leader, I'm going to say, there's a lot of narrative that's very angry and very hateful, and asking for fighting, and asking for, some very angry emotions, and trying to put a lot of fear in people. And I just see this playing out. I see this playing out, and I see it giving permission to a lot of people to not really look deep enough, but to come from this space of hurt, pain, wound. And so the wounded one is the one who reacts with hate and anger and fear. The wounded one is the one who acts out in ways that are not aligned with our deeper sense of love and unity and compassion. And so I think there's a lot of wounded parts of us acting out right now on every side, on every angle. There's a lot of pieces of us just getting, like, contracting and stepping forward in reaction to what we're seeing happen right now on the world stage. And then it's like inviting that, right? It becomes more and more polarized. It's a lot of pain, so I think that, part of the invitation of this time right now is for us to all look inside of us, because no matter what the big narrative is or the big mythology is in the world right now, we are the world. It's up to each one of us. And no matter what happens with the election, no matter what happens, or this whole good versus evil narrative of, like, this, conspiracy theories and things floating around about good versus evil, and, like, like satanic things, like, there's a lot of crazy stuff out there right now, right? But ultimately it still comes down to me, and it comes down to you, and it comes down to every person listening. How do I want to show up? If I feel that part of me that feels wounded is reacting in ways that don't feel good to me and don't feel aligned with me as love and embodiment of love and how I really want to be in the world, then I need to look inside and say, what do I need to look at and connect with right now that may not feel comfortable, but I have to see it in order for me to show up in a way that really, truly is aligned with my heart. If each one of us can look inside of us right now and make a new decision to show up with love, to show up with the desire to listen, to show up with the desire to meet each other, even if it's imperfectly, but stay in that intention, we begin to create the change that the world needs to see right now. And it's not up to Trump or Biden or anybody else outside of us. It's not up to a government. It's not up to anything. It's up to we, the people, in order to form a more perfect union with ourselves, right? This is how we need to be showing up right now from within. So that's a whole lot of information, but it's just like, I just see a lot of woundedness being played out on a global stage. And then I think personally all over the place right now.
I think there is, and I firstly I thank you for expressing your truth. I think that many people will resonate with it, and at the same time, I hold our leadership responsible, and yet I'm so glad that you moved towards the idea of self-reference. That really it's up to you and I.
Yes.
And so let's talk for a moment. Step outside of holding leadership accountable, and back to holding us accountable.
100%.
And what that looks like practically, like how do we ascend? The title of this talk. And thank you for coming, because I love talking with you. The title of this talk is to move beyond, to reclaim who we are beyond politics. Um, there's a tension that you spoke of moments ago. You said that, imagine the child within that feels unaddressed, that feels driven to perform perfectly without failure, driven for approval, or, keeps driving themselves. Even there's a tension there. There's a certain tension in the mind that that I believe we feel constantly. We feel that constantly, and whether it's motivated by social or external forces, political forces, it certainly is a tension, and it creates in us a sort of a turbulence.
An
That
inner conflict.
yes, it's even it's like it's something. It's not even just a conflict. It's like it's something there that muddies the waters and clouds the available sunlight of the soul. If we want to really talk to each other in a way that's beyond politics, we have to get back to that soulful penetration that can only get in if that tension has been alleviated. And so I think that it's up to us to make less of a restless, nervous mindset the way that we operate. And it has been. We've had every reason to be nervous and every reason to be concerned, and every reason to be upset. And now we really have to, that tension, it's sort of like a whip, it trains us, and it imposes like, it imposes on our behavior. And many times it's to the detriment of who we really are.
Yes.
And so my question might be, I know so many times we're praised for being informed and for taking a stance and for finding sophisticated answers to even more complex questions. And that there's a time for that. And yet there's also a time to negate, I believe, some of that.
Yeah.
And some of the expectations that we impose on ourselves and even on society. Just like take a momentary Sabbath, just for a moment. And as you said, to listen, to just, just invite someone over, not so that they can begin to agree or change, but just so that I can see, wow, there's a world of opinions out there that might make no sense to me, but I must learn how to accommodate it to my reality. And the only way I'm going to do that is to shine my light on it, to shine my light on them. And in that way,
yeah, Mark,
some transformation happens.
I'll add even something to that. And that was beautiful, shining a light on them, but also shining a light within us. So we want to listen to understand. And that begins with listening within ourselves too, to these parts of us. It's like if you saw a 4-year-old, having a temper tantrum or feeling scared or crying in a corner in grief, you wouldn't go over there and yell at them. What would you do? You would hold them. So how do we find these parts of us that are becoming reactive right now? And that exercise we did in the beginning of just like taking that breath into the deeper truth of our hearts, noticing this part of us, and literally like a parent to a child, wrapping our arms around ourselves and saying, it's okay to feel fear. It's okay to feel sad. I have you, I'm going to hold you. And there's no judgment. It's just a safe space to be. And can we hold ourselves this way? Because we have to be able to do this. And then we can also do this to each other and hold each other there too. Because the part of you, the you that we're experiencing that's having a reaction, and then we're having this reaction, is also a hurt part of them, because love doesn't act like that. Love doesn't act like that. Love doesn't pass judgment. Love doesn't move from fear. Love moves only from love for love. Love is all embracing, unconditional. There's no story and no judgment. It's just love. I don't not love my son on a day when he's bratty. I'm frustrated, but I love him with all my heart. Always, it never changed. There's nothing you can do to change my love for you. And if we can be that for ourselves, and if we can be that for each other, what does that look like? I'm not saying it's easy, because what comes up then are these parts of us, which is why we have to continuously keep having that inner conversation with the parts of us that want to react. So what do you need? What do you want? What are you afraid of? What are you trying to protect me from?
I think that's it. What are your needs? What are your concerns? What are your fears? And I want to hear them. I want to hear them. Not so that I can fix them or change them, but so that I can have a better understanding of who you are. And in there, create some intimacy. Oh my God, intimacy can only be helpful. It can only be helpful. This way, the next person who drives by your house and sees you, as a passionate warrior for the good, they're gonna call out of the window and say, "That's the husband and the child of that passionate warrior for the good."
Can you imagine? Yeah, yes, this is it, you guys. Gosh, can we just be this for each other? Because we have to navigate through this world together. And there's going to be more stories, and there's going to be more confusion, and there's going to be more people trying to tell you what to think and try to convince you that they hate you. That doesn't even exist. It's just a story. Nobody hates you. None of it's true. It's true. It's all just a story. Gosh, can we just come back to the heart? And I feel like I also need to say, that doesn't mean that we don't disrupt injustice. Because it is important, if we see something happening that's causing harm, that we are able to stand from a space of love, and I'm going to say like Gandhi, right? Or Nelson Mandela. I read the story the other day that I shared, where Nelson Mandela was now president and was at a restaurant, and there was somebody eating at a table, a man sitting alone at a table, and he told the people with him, invite this man over to eat with us. And the man nervously came over, and he ate his food and didn't look up once, and he was shaking the whole time. And then he left and shook his hand and left. And they said, oh my gosh, he seemed, what was wrong with him? He must have been really sick or something. And he said, no, he wasn't sick. He was shaking because of something else. And I said, well, what was it? What was it? And he said, well, he was one of my torturers when I was in prison. And he tortured me, and he did all, and he goes on to explain all the horrible things that man had done to him. And he was like, well, how come, you're not doing that back? He said, it's not in my nature. My nature is to love. And I'm not going to meet him with what he did to me to do the same thing back. No, I'm going to be in my nature. So what is your nature? What is my nature? What is our true nature? And can we be in that? Can we live in that? Can we show up for ourselves and each other in our true nature? As Martin Luther King, we don't meet darkness with darkness. We meet it with light. And so no matter what happens, as we move into the next phase of humanity here in the US and beyond, how do we continue to meet it with our true nature, with love, with that light, however that looks for you, so that it can't happen if we don't participate in it, and then we have to decide where and when we get to show up and disrupt the injustice with our love,
Yes.
and say, this is not okay.
Yes. We shouldn't have to dilute our humanity in order to be human. Val Silidker.
Rabbi Marc Labowitz.
My sweet, amazing, holy sister.
Love.
I do.
Love.
I love you. I love you.
I do too. And that's the heart of it, right?
Thank you for being here. Thank you for always being with us. Through so many wonderful adventures and challenges, you have always been a light and will always be. And I appreciate you as a torchbearer.
Likewise, we get to brighten our light and, light up the world together, right? If we all bring our lights, it's a magnificent fire, magnificent flame. So let's keep burning them together beyond all of our stories.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.